So this week we continue with the story of the book of Tobit. Very long readings, but actually the book of Tobit is very inspiring and very interesting book to read. And in today's scripture reading, we have two characters in the first reading. We have Sarah, we have Tobit. And of course, we have a parallel passage in today's gospel about the woman whose 7 husbands died and without children. Now, it is significant that Tobit and Sarah both were in great straits. They were going through difficulties and challenges in life. And they were struggling with the sufferings that they were enduring. And of course, we know that Tobit, he was blinded because droppings of the bird fell on his eyes while he was sunbathing. Then we have Sarah also struggling. It was because a monster, a demon, was in her house and was haunting and oppressing her, so much so that all her 7 husbands died before they could even sleep together. In the light of such a situation, if you were in their situation, how would you respond to God? Of course, for many of us, we will be angry with God. We can even curse God for being so unfair, unjust to us. We might even cut him off and give up our faith in him. But we find that in the person of Tobit and also Sarah, they were able to surrender their lives to God. And I believe that is a secret of happiness in life. When we face trials, when we face sufferings, when we face the mysteries of life, things that we cannot explain. And so in the case of Tobit, he still believed that God is a just God. He acknowledged God to be his Lord. You are just, O Lord, and just are all your works, even though he could not understand the workings of God. So sometimes in life, we want to know how God works. We want to explain. Yet in truth, there are many things we cannot explain. We will never be able to grasp the wisdom of God, which is incomprehensible to man. And so Tobit not only acknowledged God as his creator, Tobit also recognized that perhaps there could be a reason. He did not know the reason. Perhaps it could be the consequences of his sin. It could be perhaps not just his sins, but the sins of his fathers, of our ancestors. So sometimes in life, the consequences that we suffer, not necessarily always from God, sometimes could be our own folly. And of course, sometimes we suffer the sins of our loved ones because our loved ones fail to really respond to God. It's just like the sins of Adam and Eve. We suffer the consequences. For us parents and for us who are elders, our children will suffer the consequences of our negligence. And so Tobit, we see how receptive he was. He could not understand, but he opened up the possibility that perhaps there could be something that he has done wrong in his life. And so the response of Tobit was to ask for the mercy of God. And he believed and he hoped that God could be merciful and would be merciful, in spite of the very fact that he or his forefathers could have sinned against the Lord. And yet, we all know very well, in times of our difficulties, especially when it's unbearable, and we have many situations, when you're going through illness especially, or sometimes when we have to look after the sick or the elderly, or some difficult task that we have to do. And it's so overwhelming, so much so that we want to give up. And we would prefer death than life because the life has no meaning. If it's just one of suffering, one of endurance, and I can really feel with those people who have to struggle or to look after their elderly or look after their mentally, physically challenged children. They could be extremely demanding. And if you have work to do and you have financial difficulties, it is really a challenge. I know of this family, this young girl. She had to look after her mother, who is unable to walk, and her brother, who is mentally challenged, her father, who is also sickly, suffering from terminal illness, and she has to look after all three of them. All three of them all need caregivers, and she was a caregiver, and she was also working. So in such a situation, we can just imagine the burden. And so, like Tobit, if that is the case, again, trusting in God, if it's possible, take my life away. We simply don't have the energy, the strength to bear our sufferings. And so too, Sarah felt the same way because she was despised by the servants. And of course, she thought she would bring shame to the father, to the family as well. From perspective of filial piety, honoring the parents, she thought that killing herself would be the way, and also ask God for forgiveness. And yet, today we know that their prayers found favor before the glory of God, and Raphael was sent to bring remedy to them. The kind of openness, the kind of surrender to God. I think this is a very beautiful example in life. We just have to surrender ourselves. No point trying to explain why we have terminal illness, why we have this, why we have that. I think there will be no real answer in life. When someone meets an accident or someone, whatever it is, there could be circumstances, but at the end of the day, there is no real answer. So our hope, therefore, today, the gospel tells us, is to recognize that the God that we worship is, after all, the God of the living and not the God of the dead. In whatever situation, the Lord can help us to be healed, to be liberated from the situation we are in, as He did for Tobit and Sarah through the angel Raphael. But sometimes the Lord does not do that for whatever reasons we do not understand. And so for us, our faith is, of course, in the resurrection, where everything will be transformed, where our lives will be transformed. And of course, Jesus made it clear, and that is extreme importance for us. At the end of the day, Christian hope is hope in the resurrection. This life is a foretaste of the love of God. So if you are married, you have a foretaste of the love of God. And of course, also a foretaste of purgatory. Marital love is really a purification of oneself. So it's a foretaste of heaven when you are happy and loving, a foretaste of purgatory, when you are struggling with each other. So that is the whole process. But we need to have faith even for us in marriage. When things are difficult, we need to continue to know that there is a plan, there is a reason for us. And so it is our faith in the resurrection that gives us the motivation to keep on trying, keep on purifying ourselves, and give us the courage to endure all the challenges of life. Because at the end of the day, we know that in heaven, we will be able to love truly, inclusively, completely. And don't worry, when you go to heaven, you will still be able to recognize your husband and everybody else. Only that your love will be so inclusive, transcending this earthly life, a love that is inclusive for all. And I think this is where we believe that ultimately this is where the love of God is. And Jesus made this point to the Sadducees because they did not believe in the resurrection. Without the resurrection, there is no hope in life, honestly. If your hope, as St. Paul tells us, is only in this life, you are the most pitiable people. Our hope is not only in this life, our hope is in life hereafter. And that is why for us Christians, even if we have to meet death, we meet death always with great hope, with great joy, and knowing that everything is in the hands of God. If you have that kind of attitude and disposition, I don't think you fear death. At the same time, you don't live a hopeless life when you are going through difficult times. You will just do your best. And that is how I live my life, I just do my best. I just dance with the Lord. I just do what I can. If you fall sick, you go and see a doctor. You try to do what you can. I mean, there's difficulties in relationship we try to resolve, but sometimes it's not possible. So we leave things be, and we know that somehow the Lord is leading us, and we know that for those who loved him, St. Paul tells us, everything will work out for his or her good.